Our first reading consists of 3 quotes from 3 wise people on stillness. A couple of them use the word God, and I invite the non-theists among us to imagine that word pointing to a greater love or a greater wisdom or a greater serenity. Our first quote is by Saint Teresa of Avila. "You need not go to heaven to see God," she writes, "nor do you need to speak loud as if God were far away. Nor need you cry for wings like a dove to fly to God. Only be in silence, and you will come upon God in yourself." Our second quote is from Tara Brach from her book, Radical Acceptance. "Through the sacred art of pausing, we develop the capacity to stop hiding, to stop running away from our own experience, and we begin to trust in our natural intelligence, in our naturally wise heart, in our capacity to open up to whatever arises." And our final quote is from Mother Teresa. "We need to find God," she writes, "and God cannot be found in noise and restlessness. God is a friend of silence. See how nature, trees, flowers, grass, grows in silence. See the stars, the moon, and the sun, and how they move in silence. We need silence to be able to touch souls."
Our second reading is Today by Mary Oliver. Today I'm flying low and I'm not saying a word. I'm letting all the voodoos of ambition sleep. The world goes on as it must, the bees in the garden rumbling a little, the fish leaping, the gnats getting eaten, and so forth. But I'm taking the day off, quiet as a feather. I hardly move, though really I'm traveling a terrific distance. Stillness, one of the doors into the temple.
When I first saw stillness was the theme this month, I pictured myself on a cold, clear night, looking up at a dark sky filled with stars. Maybe with some snow on the ground, creating that muffled quiet that feels even more pronounced on a night like that. A feeling of stillness, inside and out. It seems right, that kind of stillness, that kind of soulfulness for December. This whole month feels to me imbued with a sense of holiness, of reverence that even crass commercialization hasn't been able to quell, at least not for me. In the Christian tradition, this Advent month is traditionally a time of waiting, anticipation. In the Jewish tradition, Hanukkah is a time set apart for light and miracles and hope. I love the contrast stillness has with the election stress we all just went through, the lead up, the aftermath. Stillness feels right, like the calm after the storm, like a deep breath, a door into the temple, an invitation to follow into the grandeur of the stars, the moon, the sun, an invitation to touch the soul, as Teresa of Avila puts it, to come upon God within ourselves. So that's sweet, right? Feels good. Even just talking about it, I feel my body relaxing a little bit. But I wouldn't be preaching on it if it were that simple. If it were just a question of walking out the door on a starry night and taking a deep breath. If it were that easy, we'd all be at peace, unperturbed, and pretty soon perhaps enlightened, or at least able to enter into some state of reverential stillness, of connection with the universe and what is holy whenever we wanted or needed to. But the reason I am talking about it, the reason I think Christians have created a whole season dedicated to the practice of pausing and waiting and anticipating, the reason our Jewish siblings make an explicit practice of slowing down every week for a Sabbath is because it's actually really hard to pause. It's hard to slow down, to create stillness, to cultivate spaciousness. Most of us need some kind of direction, structure, encouragement, and practice. I am a perfect example of evidence of this need. I had watched the better part of 3 videos about slowing down for this sermon before I realized the irony of playing them at double speed. You know how you can do that on YouTube these days? And I have tried off and on in my life to drive no more than 5 miles over the speed limit because it's safer, it's better for my car, it's better for the environment. And it makes me antsy, and I forget rather more often than I would like. So I ask your forgiveness for my fallible humanity if you happen to clock my little blue car on the highway going 75-ish again. And I confess that when my online yoga teacher says to me, now stretch your legs to the corners of the mat for Shavasana, those 2 or 3 minutes of stillness and relaxation for the body at the end of the yoga practice, that's supposed to be the most important part of the practice, I'm embarrassed to say just how often I actually take that opportunity to instead leap up and do the next thing on my to-do list. There are, of course, reasons why it's hard for many of us or any of us to slow down. There's reasons why we may struggle to accept that invitation from the leaves and flowers and trees to grow in silence with them and hear that still, soulful voice in our chaotic world. For some of us, being still brings up associations of being told to sit still growing up. How many times were we told to sit still at school or the dentist or at church? Many of us were told to sit still at churches whose teachings were not of our choosing. And now, as adults, the idea of being still may carry associations with being told what to do, having to spend time in ways we didn't want to, may carry associations with feeling constrained or constricted or antsy. And many of us growing up, when we did something we shouldn't have, we were sent off to the corner or to our room to be alone and think about what we had done, which is a move that, while it may have served an important purpose, may also have had the unintended consequence of associating quiet time with guilt or just bad feelings or punishment, isolation, all mashed into one big set of conditioning that may subtly keep us from this sacred art, this beautiful gift now. But maybe the most obvious reason I think most of us, one of the most obvious reasons is that I think most of us feel some kind of pressure, whether that's internal or externally generated pressure to attend to that list, to make things happen. After all, most of us don't get paid to lie down on a yoga mat and breathe, no matter how good that might be for our bodies or our souls. And frankly, even if we don't work at a paid job, it's a rare person who doesn't feel some pressure to perform, to do. We don't want to seem like we're not doing enough, whatever that means. Reverend Victoria Safford once came across a gravestone which read, "Of the deceased. She attended well and faithfully to a few worthy things." Safford thought that a little stingy, she said, on the part of this woman's survivors, a little meager as a summation of someone's whole life. But reflecting on it further, she contrasted this idea of attending to just a few worthy things to an imagined obituary for her own life, which, if she happened to be struck by lightning in that moment, she said, might read, "She attended frantically and ineffectually to a great many unimportant, meaningless details," which I think I may be at risk of a similar fate. There is a lot that seems important in any moment, and it can keep any of us busy, frantic even, could cause us to miss the big picture of what those few worthy things might be for us, where the real and resonant meaning of our lives can actually be found. But I think, at least for me, the hardest part of being still is what comes up when I put my various activities down. I've talked about this before, but it strikes me as the meat and potatoes of the spiritual path. It's those feelings or thoughts that come bubbling up when, for me, when I point myself towards spiritual teachings, when I strive to live with greater love, or in this case, a greater spaciousness that makes room for that love. There are these feelings that come up when I start being, when I just become present to whatever is here now, whether I like it or not. Those feelings are so often uncomfortable. Sometimes they are downright painful. And I think for me, some of it may well be that old conditioning that I should be doing something else or something more. Or maybe it's that old antsiness or the feeling of aloneness. Or for any of us, what comes up when we slow down may be losses that still ache, or unhealed memories asking for attention and care. Or it may just be the pain of what it is to be alive. I like what world explorer and travel writer Pico Iyer has to say on what's possible when we right-size our culture's focus on achievement and instead create some space. Our lives might be a lot more balanced, he writes, if we learn to reallocate prestige pulling it away from those with a full calendar and toward those wise enough to allow for some afternoons of reflection. We should think that there is courage not just in traveling the world, he says, but also in daring to sit at home with one's own thoughts for a while, risking encounters with certain anxiety-inducing or melancholy, but also highly necessary ideas. Without the shield of busyness, we might bump into the realization that our relationship has reached an impasse, that our work no longer answers to a higher purpose, or that we feel furious with a family member who is subtly exploiting our patience. The heroically hard worker isn't necessarily the one in the business lounge of the international airport. It might be the person gazing without expression out of the window and occasionally writing down one or two ideas on a pad of paper. The point of doing nothing, he writes, is to clean up our inner lives. Now, sitting at home with certain anxiety-inducing or melancholy thoughts may not sound like a fun afternoon, but it may be exactly what we need to unearth important realizations. The point of doing nothing may be to clean up our inner lives, which makes me think that while the idea of being able to jump directly into stillness and reverence and communion with the stars might sound nice, maybe it misses the point. Maybe part of the point of stillness is, in fact, to face and feel, to sift and sort, to process and move through. In that same TED Talk I quoted earlier, Pico Iyer also mentions a Google employee who's writing a book on what he calls the, quote, inner search engine, and the ways in which science has empirically shown that sitting still or meditation can lead not just to better health or clearer thinking, but even to emotional intelligence. You might say that wisdom begins to open up for us. Okay, so here we are in the month of December, a month that is traditionally hectic, blaring, bright, chaotic, joyful, exhausting, and occasionally a little crass. And whether you love that or hate it, this year is so different. In fact, it might kind of feel like we're getting a global timeout, sent to our houses to be far more alone than many of us would like. And that feels hard. And stuff comes up. Just the other day, a colleague of mine talked about his normally stoic, widowed father who was recently weeping with the simple longing to just hug someone. Right now, for many, stillness does not feel like a gift. It may even feel like a punishment. And we didn't do anything wrong. But maybe we get to reimagine our relationship with stillness anyway. I once heard a wise person say something like, even if you haven't chosen some circumstance, you can choose it anyway, which sounds counterintuitive, I know, but I think what they meant was, even if something happens that you do not want, that you wish with all your heart was different, you can still, after the fact, act as if you had chosen it, as if you had planned to take it on, whatever it was. Not that this will necessarily make it any easier. The feelings are still hard. The longing, the separation are still real. But when we accept even the unwelcome, it can change our relationship to the feelings we do have. We don't have to paper them over or pretend they're not there. We don't have to frantically try to make it all better. Sometimes when we open our eyes to what is painful, we can also begin to see what is beautiful more clearly, more poignantly. We may see, too, more clearly what and who we love, what is worthy for us, even if it or they are outside our ability to physically touch in this moment or this season. I want to end with a story one of my colleagues told of being in seminary, living in the dorm, and anticipating finals during the season of Hanukkah. She was over the top stressed out, as were her fellow seminarians. Nevertheless, every evening during Hanukkah, she, as a Jewish woman, would light the Hanukkah candles. And no matter how worried, uneasy, or pressured she felt that day, she would take the time to just pause and sit and watch them burn. And she found that nearly every night, as fellow students happened to walk by her open door, one by one, they would see her candles, see her, and join her, no matter how worried, uneasy, or pressured they might have felt, until she had a room full of seminarians connected by circumstance, all quietly pausing, watching candles burn together. Today, I want to invite you into stillness, into practice. Here, in this space and time where we are not alone, where we are together, where we are all connected in our common circumstance. This is an opportunity to choose stillness and simply let be what already is. Carolyn Mark has agreed to light the Hanukkah candles for our service today. And we will sit for a couple of minutes and watch them burn, and we will leave them burning for the rest of the service. I invite you to find a comfortable position. Notice your breath and notice these gorgeous candles as we sit in silence together. Amen. Carving out time for quiet may not be immediately dazzling, compelling, or sexy. It may not win awards, at least not of its own accord. But in the absence of frazzled attendance to too many details, it is in spaciousness that what is truly worthy can begin to emerge again. It is in practicing stillness with all its attendant discomfort that we might develop the discipline, humility, and wisdom to attend faithfully to those few things that matter the most to us. May it be so. Amen.
Hands open to the day. Breathe in, breathe out. Hands joined as if to pray. Breathe in, breathe out. Arms reaching to the sky. Then circling around, down to the earth. Eyes lifted to the light, to the light. Hands, branches catching rain. Breathe in, breathe out. Then rising like a stalk of grain. Breathe in, breathe out. Arms reaching to the sky. Then circling around, down to the earth. Eyes lifted to the light, to the light. Hands open to the day. Breathe in, breathe out. Hands joined as if to pray. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out.
Perfect.
Happy spring, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
May we study stillness and joy. May we know our belovedness like a memory calling out from the center of our being, connecting every little piece of everything to everyone and all of us. May we feel gratitude rising and praise for this chance to begin again this day with hope. Amen.